Hello. Oh, this is so nice. I can hear your mutedness.
I know what you're politely saying. It wasn't anything interesting to hear. I just wondered if you were still sort of deep in writing Perda, or whether you were actually sort of coming up for some future text.
Yeah, so I just finished the interview, which went well, with Digital Planet, BBC.
All right, yeah.
So I'm just writing some notes here.
No, I'm just seeing my monitor in the background telling me that I should be at the meeting I'm currently at, which is very useful.
Yeah. So BBC World has a weekly audience of 279 million people.
And they're not going out at the moment.
And they're all staying at home waiting for me.
A literally captive audience.
Yes. It was funny because later today, Bint is having another interview with another BBC thing with Wendy.
Yeah. All right.
I think that was funny. I say hi to Wendy. She's just colorful. So that's all good. So where is everybody else?
I don't know.
So I had a meeting with Les and Dave yesterday, and they also, oh, fantastic. Oh, you got a non-smudged one. Both my copies are smudged, which is kind of okay.
All right, go ahead. You were saying?
No, I was just going to say I had a supervision meeting this morning with Dave and Les.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I thought the last one was going to be yesterday, but they took some time today. So I've been given lots of things to do, including earlier in the week, Dave suggested I do a charts. So I've been doing plenty charts. It's interesting with charts, isn't it? It both helps communicate and it makes it look very technical.
Yes. And if you're unlucky, it makes you realize you've sort of done it all wrong.
Yeah, that happened.
But I mean, in fairness, I mean, and this thing I think you're finding is it's not, actually the closer you get to the wire, you realize that actually it's not that you've got all the wrong bricks. They're just not stacked. They actually stack better in an order that wasn't apparent when you started out.
Oh yeah.
If you'd known that before you started, well, you wouldn't have needed to done the work. So it's it's an unavoidable part of the process. And and I quite understand if someone tells you at the beginning, you still wouldn't believe them. So you have basically you just have to go through that pain.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, wait, folks coming, and I just been thinking. Interesting point somebody brought up. It was over in the Tinbox forums. It happened, and it's a casual point. Someone said, "Right, I've just retired, and I want to read sort of all the books. The books that ought to be read, or reread them." And I'm trying to work out how to sort of do the order. And I found myself thinking, "No, I don't think you want to do that at all." I mean, you could just literally put them 1 to infinity in a big stack, but it's your time, it's your interest and your edification. So really what you want to know is, which books do I need to read before others? And which ones do I want to probably revisit after others? So actually what you want is you actually want a really loose form of associative indexing that sort of says, okay, well, I've done Homer. Now, what next? What builds on that? And plus the fact that if you've got several disciplines, you might want to say, okay, well, I've done enough classics. I'll do some philosophy now. Which might still impinge on the last book you've read, but gets you out of this sort of march to Moscow of being too much in one discipline, which I think can be a bit deadening.
Yeah, no, that is of course a challenge. It's a bit like being a DJ, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, and I know I'm not allowed to show you things, but when you get time, you might actually quite enjoy this. Ooh, where is it? Too much glare. Or you have that biography of the pixel.
We'll hold her back up again.
Okay, sorry. It's by Alvy Ray Smith. A biography. Sorry, it probably actually was. You may have mentioned it in an earlier meeting. And although some of the maths going way over my head, there's just some super stuff here.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, talked about some of that kind of graphic stuff in the interview today. So that was kind of cool. And yeah, Peter, thank you for your contribution to what's happening with visual meta that I've stuck in my thesis.
Ah, very good. If it was up to me, I'd give you the degree immediately.
Oh, okay. Well, apparently, really, it is up to you.
I mean, really, both of you guys, as far as I'm concerned, have already been at the professorial PhD level for ages before they got around to formally rubber stamping and acknowledging it.
Yeah, but I mean, as we were talking about just before you joined, I mean, part of it is the expectation. I mean, it's that kind of thing. They tell you before you start, you wouldn't think it, but one of these things you get towards the end, you realize that actually you've known all these things. What you haven't particularly done up to this point is put them in a useful order, both for yourself and for other people. So in other words, just all the bits are lying around somewhere in here or on the desk. Putting them together in a useful form is an interesting exercise, and thankfully one I don't have to go through again.
Yeah, so wait a few, I don't know, it's nice that it's an easygoing group this, but it can be a little frustrating when people show up here or there, so I'm just wondering. But yeah, it's interesting with the whole thesis stuff, how they choose to reveal next stages to us. It's very much like a video game, isn't it? You have now reached this platform. Did you know? So yeah.
There is something in that, yeah.
Oh, yesterday they said, oh, you did this in author, didn't you? Yes. It needs to be fully justified. It can't be left aligned.
Oh, bollocks. Sorry, I was probably not saying that on the recording, but really, I mean, whenever I asked about the template for this stuff, I said, well, use whatever you like. In other words, use whatever you like, and then we'll tell you it's wrong. We won't tell you what's right. We'll just tell you if it's not right.
Yeah, exactly. So, sorry, Brandon, just walking in on talking about with the
thesis formats and unhelpful advice being received thereon.
Yeah, last week of seeing my supervisors, who are both brilliant, by the way, but yesterday they saw the PDF and said, oh, this is done in author, isn't it? It needs to be fully justified. So thankfully, that's the kind of stuff that Jacob actually managed to do overnight. So the interesting thing is it's only fully justified as an export option, not when you're working.
And at least you're not struggling with LaTeX and the odd line that just refuses to wrap whatever you do, and therefore runs off into the margin, causing people to comment quite unhelpfully. Indeed.
So yeah, now that there's four of us, so the BBC interview earlier today went quite well. It was really, really lovely people. Thank you, Brandon, for the double thumbs. And they had clearly, yes. What's that?
I said double thumbs. Yes, that's worthy.
Yes, thank you. So it was interesting because the interview's voice was really, really good, proper British, pleasant voice. So we talked about that. It was supposed to be a 15-minute interview to be edited down to 6, but we had a half-an-hour interview, plus we spoke for another half an hour. It was just Vint and me, the interviewer and the producer. So talking about voices and stuff, he mentioned that they like my voice for presenting the work. Obviously, I'm not a radio voice. And that's how I found out that they had actually listened to all the videos on the website, because he said he'd heard it a lot before. So that was a sneaky way of finding out that they've done their research properly. So the questions were very good, very clever. The one at the end, when it was more product rather than philosophy focused, they asked me, so how does this benefit the average user who isn't necessarily an academic, or rather who isn't necessarily a student? So I first did a take of, oh, it's easier and powerful, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, can I do it again? I said, this isn't for those people. we're trying to build a bike, a racing bike, not a tricycle with easy click buttons. So it's really for the people who want to learn to interact with their information like they're using an instrument, which was a bit more honest.
Well, it's interesting. I've been having a sort of side chat with someone on another forum because I made a comment about, people sometimes, well, people, myself included, being a bit lazy about learning. And so I said, oh no, you can't really say that, because everyone finds something different. I said, tell me about it. There are a lot of things I find very difficult, but I'm also conscious that sometimes I just basically can't be asked to make the effort. And occasionally I need to be called out on that, because to do the thing I want to do, I need to make the effort. And in making the effort, you may well find out there are some things that you individually find much more difficult than others. But if you're dealing with anyone who's in any way responsible or helpful, what that will normally do is get you more useful input, or if it's a product, it may evolve something that makes it easier. But hiding behind this thing of saying it's hard is a very, well, it's probably been going since the year dot, but it seems very modern malaise.
Yeah, I mean, we also talked about, anyway, you'll hear it if you want to. It's out on Tuesday. It was Vint Cerf and me, and Vint would often interrupt to say extra stuff, which was quite cute, I thought. So I can't really complain when you want to say something.
I like the metaphor of learning an instrument here with regards to the tool. It's quite applicable for anything that has a kind of longer learning curve, steeper learning curve, I should say, with outsized benefits. So that plays well. I'm excited to listen. Made a note for Tuesday.
Thank you. That hang on, I think I can put it in the chat here. The episode link is up. Yeah, no, that kind of analogy is a little bit Doug and also Alan Kay. Alan is very much about learning an instrument. So I'm glad that I pulled myself together and didn't go all salesy, but a bit more honest. I did say there are some powerful tools that people use, like Roam and Notion. This is not advanced like that, but it's also not just and click and play for everybody. So
it's interesting you use those two analogies, because I would have said, in terms of what they do, they're not particularly deep in the area they're in. There are better, it's a sense of it. So this point of it being a tool, it's a tool for a purpose. And if you actually want to do that particular thing, use that tool and learn that tool. And I mean, the sort of woodworkers, well, the home workbench is a case in point. You don't just buy a screwdriver and use it to chisel your wood with. I mean, you could, but it's not very efficient. And at some point, you begin to absorb the fact that there are good tools for good purposes. And one of the hard parts at the learning end of that is actually trying to find out which are the good ones and why, which has nothing to do with marketing and all has to do with the chicken egg problem. And until you really understand quite what you're doing, you don't necessarily know why it is. You need something that appears to be too complex for what you're doing.
I think there's a lot of damage in the phrase, a bad workman blames his tools. All the workmen I've ever seen are very specific about what tools they use. When you have a house renovation or something, they don't come along just with a hammer and nail and say this can do everything.
Yeah, and similarly, I love in that context how people will tell you why they use this and not that. Whereas, I naively, not being expert in that field, would have used this to do, a particular repair job. And I said, no, what you want is one of these. And the reason is it does this properly and it doesn't break halfway through or something. And that's wonderful. And that's the kind of thing, again, in this context around textual tools is something that's good to try and ramp up.
Alan, I see you just joined. I'm going to paste in the chat here again. I just finished my BBC interview, which went well. So that was nice. So that'll be out on Tuesday. I think that's the link to the upcoming episode. And,
nice.
Yeah, it was good. They clearly had done their research. We sent them a briefing sheet and they've clearly gone to the website and watched the videos as well. And I was just sharing that at the end when they asked, how was this for the average user? And I said, it isn't for the average user. It's for people who take their text seriously. I didn't say it quite like that, but it's not like if you don't have a target audience, you're speaking to nobody, right? So, the kind of things we're doing here in this community isn't. somebody sitting down and clicking on a button like that. So anyway, so it was all good. It was Vint surfing me. So very, very nice to have him contextualize.
That's fantastic. Can't wait to hear it.
So there's almost 300 million people who listen to BBC World Service. I don't expect that many to listen to this, but there will be a number of people. So the chance of something happening is, not zero. So I managed to get Jacob to work extra hard to come out with a new version of Author, which has all kinds of little things. But I think now is probably a good time for us to finalize how we're going to run next year. We've decided one monthly speaker and all of that stuff to kind of, nail it down.
Well, on the author reader front, especially if I hope you're monitoring your downloads for when that comes out. You should be seeing a spike.
The amount of downloads is so little. That's, I'm going to start marketing from January. It'll be like, oh, more than one person downloaded it today. Champagne time. Yeah, I hope
If
it'll
every
happen.
BBC World listener would just send you £5.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, you could just only take Bitcoin. Just kidding. But seriously, we haven't talked about your product strategy and your marketing strategy and stuff like that yet, because I know this time is not to talk about your product, but maybe I would love to talk about that and offer help where it's wanted. I think the product has a lot of potential, and I know it's a goal of yours to make it into a viable source of income. And so I think that
I would love that. I would greatly love that.
Okay.
Just wanted to show
it's a
you.
great tool, and I think that I'll just say, compared to a lot of the other tools out there, and this, it's a great tool, but a lot of the other tools out there have more presence, right? Just because I don't, they know how to schmooze, right? Mm. And I think that there's a degree of that can make reader and author feel like it's part of that tribe or a contender, especially if you have like a public change log or needs. It's harder when you don't have a dedicated staff, but yes. I don't know. I think more can. I'm excited to see what the downloads are like.
It's funny. We were supposed to see Hamilton on Thursday, but all shows got canceled because of COVID. But yep. There is that line early on in there, and I kind of hear almost that, get that guy in front of a crowd. So yes, now I'm trying to get in front of a crowd.
Yeah, good.
So I wanted to surprise you all with this. So this is one of our websites, journal.global. And select text, here's the little dot, point to it. Hang on, I'm just confusing myself. Point to it and click copy BibTeX. Go to the software called Author. These are my notes for the call. And paste, ta-da, paste as a citation. It pastes as a citation without the selected text, but that's because the BibTeX, the format for the quotes is to have them inside curly bits, not these, because they shouldn't be visible to the normal BibTeX. So we haven't coordinated that yet, but isn't that quite cool? It took the name of the author, the title, published date, all that good stuff automatically.
That is cool. Have you seen the tool Quotebacks? Have you heard of this at all?
Quoteback?
Quotebacks.
That's really weird. Why is it doing that?
I'll share a link.
Okay.
It's kind of similar to this. It does not cover the same ground. with regards to bringing the kind of native information over. But it's a pretty neat pattern for sharing quotes from journals, articles, anything that you kind of see. And this can be embedded in a website. It's run by a pretty cool group of people. What's dawning on me from what I saw with regards to like bringing Rain's info over from the citation was, okay, this is great. I still may need a little bit more context on what this might refer to, as you would clearly say, but this may provide a bit of inspiration for you in terms of how that info could be brought over.
You quote back. Okay, yeah, thank you. Oh, interesting. Yeah, so yeah, continue.
Oh, I was just going to say, unrelated, but Brandon, I saw the sticky notes on the table you had in the background, and my heart saying, "I love it." I have similar stuff, and that occurred. That made me think that maybe given the season, it would be nice at some point to just get to know all of each other a little bit more. Like we talk about these initiatives, but I don't know that I know too much about you guys. So I don't know. Maybe that's something to stick on the calendar.
Human Day.
I consider you all friends, but I have no idea like where you live or So yeah, that could be fun. Just like a happy hour.
A very good and valuable suggestion, I think. Brandel, I saw you just came in, which is great. Hi. Brief update. I did the BBC interview this morning. Been surfing me. It's going to be up on Tuesday. And I was just showing now that Chris Guttridge has built a plugin for WordPress where you can copy the BibTeX and paste that. BibTeX is the transport mechanism that Visual Meta uses, plus extras. So yeah, I mean, one thing we need to do is have a bit of a strategy for next year, but we don't have to do that today. I'm going to email Barbara first and ask her if she can do January. And yeah, no, Chris is just doing brilliant stuff. But then, yeah, should we have a little bit of round of introductions that are relatively brief, but also relatively unprofessional? Where we are and whatnot.
Sure.
Well, you have to start, Alan.
Okay. And I can actually even pull it in and make it relevant because I want to talk a little bit about this thing that is happening as much as I try to prevent it, apparently. I mean that jokingly, but there's this Xana 2 that is happening on Sunday. And I'd love to discuss it with you all and even kind of get your feedback as to what it should be about. And obviously, if any of you want to join and be a part of it, I consider it as being an offshoot or a child of Future of Text in some ways, in many ways. So
what did you call the event?
Well,
what did you say? Zenith or something?
Xana 2.
Oh, right. As in Xanadu, Xana 2, right.
Yeah, I was making a joke, I guess, probably a couple months ago about how what I wanted is a way to talk about the patterns behind all of these tools for thought, in the hopes that maybe there's an opportunity for a protocol layer or a schema similar to Markdown that isn't owned by anybody, right? Where we could not just export our notes from one tool to another, but actually, seamlessly move from node to node, right? And I was saying like a Xana redo. Ian Neal suggested Xana 2, and I was like, that's fine. Whatever anybody's happy with, let's go. So Yeah, so it's not meant to be any kind of product based or solution based talk. It's meant to be about discovering. Well, here's how I put it. The invite that I'm thinking of sending out, or whatever's going to maybe be on the web page. Productivity software is booming. It seems that every week there's a new app that promises to organize your brain. The fresh ideas, the community engagement, the novel implementations are wonderful. But what do we want for the long term? I can't imagine that we want to jump from app to app, building a new knowledge graph every time. It's good to try these apps out because we're exploring a territory we don't really understand. And there are these ley lines that connect these apps, but they are difficult to put into words, right? At the same time, we seem swamped with more information than ever and more miscommunication than ever, or misinformation, and it doesn't feel sustainable. So going back to the long term, going back to the original question, what do we want for the long term? For me, I imagine something. There's some givens like data sovereignty, but I think of it in terms of how wonderful mail is, not just email, but regular mail, right? Where the only thing I pay for is the postage. So there are other parts too, like one of the ley lines might be a sense that directories and documents don't necessarily need to be the organizing principle anymore. People seem to be more comfortable with graphs and more granular separation of thoughts, in the form of text blocks and such, and outlines. So there's a lot to explore, and I think there are principles behind it. What's difficult is saying, okay, what is the problem that we're trying to solve here, and how declarative will that problem be? Where does it sit between implementation and philosophy, and how do we avoid navel gazing? I didn't mean to go on that tangent. That's just about Xana2. Everybody's invited. I'd love to get to talk about it and see what you think.
I'm just laughing because you clearly failed the assignment. You're supposed to just waffle on about yourself and stuff, and instead you go into this majorly important.
I know.
Not a bad thing. Not a bad thing.
Is there a link?
We're putting the website together in the next couple of days, and I'll send an invite out for the Zoom chat. It's going to be on Sunday at 7:30 Eastern EST.
One thing that is really, really important.
PM.
PM. Sorry, PM.
One thing that is really important, obviously, is for humanity to somehow connect things on a bigger level. Like you said, what you're doing there relates to what we're doing here, and I absolutely agree with you. And I think you're more at the meta-NIC level, to follow Doug's language, or a C level. So are you all familiar with Doug's ABC? I'll briefly say it. Yeah, Brandel, you are definitely. A level is, getting better at making phone calls, let's say. It's a work activity. B level is increasing how we can be better on the phone. Like, could be better phone connection technically, or it could be training for how to speak on the phone. But C is the bottom level of how do you make better the making better? How do you improve the improvement? Right. So a meta-NIC is having all these network communities, and then you have them connected so you can share C-level knowledge with different organizations. So when you're talking about how these tools for thoughts, blah, blah, all that good stuff, that's very much in that picture. And I think it's super important.
That's wonderful. Was that Doug or Ted?
Doug. 100% Doug. I wouldn't say Ted would be in that perspective at all. He's more of an artist.
Well, Doug is working on work. Ted is working on information. And the way that Doug ultimately works on work is through information, but the concept of the Bootstrap Institute is the concept of being able to design the first C activity organization.
Yes.
So that's where his initial vision for what the organization should be called, that has now been called the Doug Engelbart Institute, which is understandable. And so that's why it was at bootstrap.org prior to that.
That's a brilliant way to put it.
Yeah, that was very
Thank you.
nice. Very nice. So for me, who is someone who has skin in the game, because I have invested in a product and in a series of stuff, my ego has to be taken into account. And I'm very happy to discuss, well, I'm very happy to discuss my ego because it's not very big. But what I mean is, you know, you guys with this American Constitution or whatnot, a lot of it is about ownership. And I don't think it's just about property ownership. It's about ownership, owning where you are in a group, in a society. So I think I'm an okay case study for you, as in, what do I own? What do I want to share? And how do I want to fit with other people? Because I'm certainly not of the kind of person who is, I'm building my own thing and get on the bandwagon or get out, obviously. But I would very much like to figure out how best to connect this kind of network to that kind of network.
Good. Yeah, there's some of it that seems like it could go down dead ends, and almost some of it could be a useless exercise, because ultimately it's like implement technology is sort of like an animal or evolution. Implementation is going to go its own way, and so guiding principles might not be any help, but the hope could be that there would be a kind of a Declaration of Independence, just to loop back to the Constitution, or a Bill of Rights or something that is like, here's what the information or the meta-NIC citizen wants to see as a baseline. And so for future makers, future app builders, if they maybe pull some of this as inspiration and it fits into their systems, then we can get closer to a united front.
It's interesting. I was jokingly, because I'm such a mad Hamilton fan, I was going to say we need Federalist Papers too. And I realized that's exactly what we need. You know, that could be.
That's it.
Yeah, that's what we should call it, right? All the opinion pieces to support this. Peter.
Yes.
Yeah, just by way of historical reflection, I'd like to mention that there was always a tension between the Constitution as a limited grant of powers to government versus the Bill of Rights as a set of prohibitions on what the government can do. And there was actually a debate at the time of the founding as to whether it might be a mistake to have the Bill of Rights, because that implied that anything that wasn't explicitly put down in the Bill of Rights was actually something that was available to the government. So instead of having the government work within the narrow confines of what was set out in the original Constitution, it evolved into the government can do anything unless we explicitly nailed down in detailed specification that it couldn't be done, and included that in the Bill of Rights. So now we basically have a concern that we might be slipping into almost a state of medical tyranny, certainly at the gubernatorial level. In some of the states, the governors have said, we're now in an emergency. It's health, and health, there wasn't anything in the Bill of Rights limiting what we can do with respect to health. And because at the time the Supreme Court did the initial rulings on mandated vaccines, they were dealing with a disease that killed a very high percentage of people that got it, and a vaccine that actually prevented people from getting it. Now suddenly they read into that a global power for state governments to do anything as long as they can hang a loose nail on health. And suddenly you get to a situation where it's okay for Home Depot to be doing business, but the mom and pop grocery store gets shut down by the governor's arbitrary rule.
Peter, we're going quite far into.
Yeah, going far. But anyhow, the point is, just trying to circle back, that when you have a Bill of Rights people perceive it to be limited to those rights that were narrowed in the Bill of Rights. And it's better to have sort of a limited grant of power with the understanding that anything outside of it would revert back to the underlying people. And okay, I'll just stop here because I'm going off into legal philosophy tangent, which is getting too far afield.
That's
Hey,
great.
we're watching The Good Wife every night, so we're in legal land, my wife and I these days. Mr. Mark.
Yeah, just maybe broadening out. I was something to think of before Peter started speaking, but it speaks to the same thing really. Is that and sort of keeping the concept of the metanic is, as well as sort of saying the things that we want or aspire to, is with a nod to the fact that humanity has constantly proved that we can't have nice things, because the moment we the people get involved, we break it. And that doesn't mean to be all dystopian in an approach, but I think another useful thing when working at high level is to look at what in these sort of well-intentioned aspirational frameworks we make, where the points of brittleness are as well, because it's quite easy often in trying to build out how something should work is to put aside, because it's too difficult at the moment, things that actually are really quite brittle in it, because it relies on humans, and humans sadly are often feckless and fickle.
Right. So if we go
I love it.
all the way back to Alan's original thing of we should be able to share knowledge either as an exported thing or as a live thing. Brandel, please.
I was just going to follow on, well, partly from what Mark was saying about humans being fickle, and partly to Alan's original brief of introducing background and thesis. I would say that the thing that I am interested in within the context of text, within the context of human-computer interaction, is incorporating a vision of what embodied cognition, extended mind, and the general understanding that we have of what the mind and the social being of the human being is, which gives us hopefully a slightly more sympathetic view of why we fail, how we fail, with tools and with systems. Because a lot of the time, the high-mindedness of what a tool ostensibly does is at odds with some of the, I mean, it's not true, but lizard-brained sort of reflexive tendencies of what the human animal is. And so my work in VR, my work with novel systems is largely in an effort to understand what it is that we can do to form information work and text in particular into something that we can understand in a way that is more accommodating to what we've come to learn about human physiology, human psychology over the last 50 years or so. Because I think that that's another piece that's very critical for figuring out the futurity of text that is relatively under-indexed by a number of the people sort of working in the field. That we don't talk as much about the human and the human-computer interaction and what it means we should do. So while virtual reality is very interesting, what's really more important is coming up with something that really does more for the way we be people. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited that Barbara Tversky is going to be the first speaker. I think Mind in Motion is an incredible work in terms of its impact on what we do in HCI, and I look forward to having that conversation kicked off by her thesis.
Brandel, that's really nice to hear. And I'm going to obviously hand straight over to Alan. I just wanted to mention that Stefan Harner, who was the most recent expert I interviewed for my work. He went on and on and on, and he hates the idea of PDF. It took him a long time to settle down and accept that maybe it's useful for the short term, but he's very much on the level you're talking about. That interview is being transcribed, and I will make an article version of that available. Thought it was very, very useful. Should probably get him to talk as well. He's angry like Ted, but in a very different way. Alan.
I don't want to take over the whole talk, but
I think what you've done. Sorry, before you say that, the whole thing about introducing, talking, fine, we can do that another day. I think what you're doing on Sunday really is a great topic. I think everyone's super interested, so don't worry about that.
Okay, all right, thank you. And Brandel, I love your definition of your thesis, and so with that, I can kind of go into an auxiliary thesis of mine. Like I agree with you. That's my end goal as well, and the other part of me is like how to get from here to there, and so a little bit about me, my background. Well, I started out as a cartoonist, and then the story is I got really frustrated how cartoons were displayed on the web because they didn't work the same way. They didn't feel the same way. And so I figured I could solve that problem by learning to code, because I was incredibly naive. And so I learned to code, and still very much UX and product guy. I never solved that problem, but going to the UX and then the here to there are tensions that I see where specifically that apply to the embodied cognition, the embodied, the even the portability of information, that I feel like is couched in a problem that doesn't actually have to do with tech, and in fact, some ways tech makes it worse. So this is an incredible book called The Metaphysical Club, and I'll read a little bit of it. That is the real treasure of this book is what introduces someone I've never heard of, Chauncey Wright, who's sort of the Socrates of this group at the time, and his enemy was Herbert Spencer. And he says of Herbert Spencer that give me just a second, I'll have it. Spencer's mistake was to treat the concepts of science, which are merely tools of inquiry, as though they were realities of nature. The theory of natural selection, for example, posits continuity in the sequence of natural phenomena. Evolution does not proceed in leaps, but continuity is simply a verbal handle we attach to a bundle of empirical observations. It is not something that actually exists in nature. Spencer failed to understand this. Therefore, he imputed cosmic reality to what are just conceptual inferences, just words. He basically reified these concepts. And so the more that we do with information, the more we unintentionally reify what are meant to just be handles, best and closest at hand that we have at the moment, and turn them into things. And so if we keep going down that road, it becomes a little like the Red Queen problem, where it's never good enough, and we keep getting more and more granular information. We find it harder and harder to connect. So that's another way of saying that is like more UI makes it worse. And I can frame that more concretely in the hours and hours of training I have to do for my job, where I'm going through these obligatory classes and training, and I'm thinking they're actually just making it more confusing and more arbitrary, because they're inflicting their way of thinking about it, separating the problem onto me when I already had my own mental framework, So that's the kind of like a dark mirror, the opposite of what are the opportunities. It goes right back to Mark's point about looking for brittleness. And I'm very, very interested in identifying those points of brittleness. I cede the table, or the chair.
Okay, my turn. Let's talk about sex. The reason I say that is, I'm 54. So obviously I've gone through stages of my life where I react to impulses in a different way, right? And I'm now looking at my child and how to bring him up to deal with impulses in a different way. And it's such a clear-cut way to remind ourselves how not logical, not objective, but programmed and through evolution, and subjective we are, right? Like the way men and women treat each other. Are you wearing a short skirt? That whole discussion, right? Not going to go into the discussion, but my point is that very little of what we perceive has anything to do with reality in terms of a boring objective sense. I just posted in the chat here a mathematician's lament where he's saying that maths is art too. So the big issue here, I think, is really, really clear. We need more spirituality. We need more religion, if that's the type of spirituality people want. I don't actually care. But when it comes to how we solve the big problems in the world, it comes down to love. You know, people have to not hate other people. It's really, really simple. So I think that that is definitely a thread in our discussion, because I have a very strong feeling from all of you that you all want everybody to be better off. But you know, that's very separate from how we interpret information. You know, information doesn't persuade someone to go from bomb that city or give them flowers. That doesn't do that. You know, that's an emotional thing. It's a human thing. It's an educational thing, which I definitely think we need to get back to. And I really wouldn't mind if we had a separate series of discussions on how to do that. You know, how can we employ religion positively in this day and age? Because obviously religion is hugely divisive as well. The family's home. Let me just close the door. And yeah, over. I'm not so sure, Peter, about your point there.
Oh, about the fetish, I would say it's definitely true. There have been periods in the past when ankles have been taboo to show, and so showing ankles has been a major part of kind of presentation for sexual sorting and the various sort of social sexual roles of things like handkerchiefs have been really central as a consequence of the way that they've been incorporated within taboos. So I think that you're onto something there. Yeah, I mean, the way that I see the sort of increasing and maximizing social utility is through maximizing people's capacity for expression, understanding, and agency. But that requires a more holistic appreciation and understanding of what it is that we be, and understanding the pitfalls that people as information processing devices foist on people as a sort of animal people, apes with smartphones, inevitably end up sort of interpreting them as, and recognizing, to the point of the Federalist Papers, that there are entities and organizations, powers that exist aside from the government, prevailing forces that can pull people in certain ways. You know, and technology, as it's currently understood, is an amalgam of a number of agencies and entities that have sort of by turns very narrow views of their rights and responsibilities with regard to the human agency. The US government and other governments don't see themselves as seeing like what tech is as something that needs to be regulated from a human attentive perspective. And then that ends up with other organizations below that level in the stack saying that they can do things, but also talking out of the corner of their mouths about how little sort of responsibility and onus falls to them as to what it is that the practical long-run societal consequences of their actions on the people. They say like, oh, we just make these phones. We don't need to worry about how people sort of attend to their lives as a consequence. Thankfully, Apple at least is now recognizing with things like the privacy, whatever they call it, the nutrition card, the nutritional label on privacy. I'd like to see that expanded into recognizing that the technology is a series of value systems that we can look at through a number of different lenses. So, you know, privacy is one of them, but also like what happens to your life satisfaction as a consequence of using this app for 6 months. Those are things that would be really wonderful to incorporate as well, just so that we know what this stuff does.
That's wonderful, Mark. I see you have your hand, but just really briefly, Two things, Peter, the whole comment of exposing ears or whatever, I'm not talking about what's exciting for someone. I'm talking about the fact that something is exciting for someone. Just that we have strong reactions, like someone seeing a puppy or whatever it is a reminder of our not objective point of view. That's all I meant. But Brandel, you used the magic word agency. And I think that is so important. The entire hierarchy of means we're trying to bring up Edgar is under the notion of agency. He must feel agency, because agency gives him ownership, but also responsibility. Before I give you the mic, Mark, so to speak, the example is he can choose what we have for dinner, but he has to eat it. When we're done eating, he takes his plate to the sink. If he's a guest or whatever, it's not, oh, how nice he is as a child. It is, he must learn that his actions have consequences, not just bad, as in punishment, but also good, that he can contribute something. So I think that was it was really nice to hear that word in what you were saying there. Brandon, Mark, yes, sorry, Mark, you first. I'll pause for
I was, well, keeping on with this, in a sense, a general theme, and thinking back to your earlier point about, people doing things and I mean, in a sense, I had to put some perspective in things in terms of where people are coming from. I suppose, because I'm old enough to not really care what people think anymore, but I mean, I'm constantly, not surprised anymore that everybody, I think, based probably on my accent more than anything else, assumes that I'm a completely establishment person. In fact, I'm anything but. I'm totally dyspraxic. I'm left-handed. I have Asperger's, and I have never been an insider in anything all my life. In fact, I've normally been the person actually standing out.
Mark, that's not true.
What?
You are...
no. Well, okay, present things accepted. But what I mean is in terms of people's expectations. In other words, my viewpoint when I sit here is not one of sort of established view or rights. Much, I think back to my service career, I always end up as a prisoner's friend, because, everyone has to be represented. And I love that. And it's like when I had a startup, I was constantly shocked that people come down to us, well, we just had to fire all these people and get somebody else because that would move something on a spreadsheet, without any thought as to actually what that meant, because I've hired people, I've fired people. I can tell you the second is far harder when they've done absolutely nothing wrong, but apart from the fact that, the company screwed up. And so that's why, although I probably appear somewhat curmudgeonly in terms of things, it's really just, I have a very real sense of how things break. And I just think one of my observations is that organizations and structures, especially when we get towards our aspirations of what we want things to be, too easily just cast aside the things that are inconvenient. And I know it and I understand it, because sometimes you just don't want this sort of crud to get in the way. But I much as I suppose it's a bit like my views on AI, is I don't mind as long as there's a sort of bit of adult supervision, i.e. human, somewhere in the loop, because otherwise it's the blind leading the blind. Anyway, that's the gist of it. Only to say that, so if it gives you a slightly better perspective of where I'm coming from, a lot of things, plus the fact I never had a day's training in any of the stuff I did in my life. I went off to sea because, I had no home to go back to, and so that's what I did. Many people in the past have done. I ran away to sea for a few years, and I was the naval signals officer, which is sort of how I got sort of interested in computing, or personal computing. I just thought it was coming along, and to the amusement all around, I used to have a computer, little word processor on my desk, and people would come and peer at the future through my doorway. And then did a startup through the early web age, and have then effectively been an information emergency plumber. So I've always, again, been working slightly on the outside of the norm. The one thing apart from my service, the last time I had a sort of 9-to-5 job and a regular paycheck was when I left the Navy in '93. So I've been playing a somewhat different furrow, and it's certainly informative to one's worldview. Anyway, I don't know.
I've got a go ahead, please. Brendan,
I can tie this back. Go ahead, Alan.
No. I was going to go on another I was just going to fill blank air because I'm on my phone, so I can't see when people have their hands up.
Gotcha. I wanted to pull back to kind of two themes that are very overlapping. Frode, you talked about bringing love and religion back into information. I suppose I think of that in a way of like, how do we evoke emotion and have a holistic relationship with the information that we experience? How do you create those experiences? And Brandel, what you said about almost like the nutritional labels on software has been something that's been floating around my brain for a long time. With regards to downloading a new app, a simple action of I'm going to decide to use Frode's favorite, TikTok. Like I'm going to use TikTok here. I should have some understanding of what that's going to kind of occupy in my life. What is the amount of time on average that a standard user kind of spends with this app on a daily basis? If it's, you know, and the actual metric probably could change in that case, but if I can get more information about what my experience might be before jumping into it, I'm gonna have a much more humane relationship with the software that I use. And that can continue on with, you know, some of the ways that we actually work in different large scale projects. Some of the great mentalities of a retrospective to kind of recap what is working well for you and what is not. Having a checkpoint after a month of using a piece of software per se, and seeing what is working and what is not. So I believe there's a lot of these, this general theme of having a positive and kind of constructive, holistic relationship with the information and the apps that we use, the software that we use, and how that can be conveyed. So just chiming in on those points, I didn't want to forget that because that aspect of nutritional labels is a powerful one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really, really interesting because that requires serious long-term philosophical and other research. You know, TikTok was one thing for me when I started it, as an example. Now it's something completely different. It's so information dense that I don't use it much, because 2 or 3 TikToks, I've actually learned something. You know, it's like literally hard stuff, boom. So it's like, whoa, I don't use it for relaxing. So to be able to somehow research those changes and different use cases would be very, very valuable. I'm not sure if it can fit in a nutritional label type thing, but it would definitely be worthwhile to do. But just also on the whole love thing, Alan did something really important a while ago on the call. He said he considers us friends. That is the key. You know, we all talk about, you know, around Christmas and stuff, there are all these messages on Facebook around, tell the people you are close to that you love them. Yes, but what about your friends? To even, you know, especially with us males, to even acknowledge, to even say, you are my friend, it's not part of our culture, is it? It's something that after 10 years, maybe you reflect on it when you have a beer an evening or something. It's a bit pathetic. You know, a dating relationship is easier because there are rules. For a community of people to come together and be human, other than on the very hippie side of things, which is all fine, it's not so common. So for us to even just practice using the F word, friend, I think is really important, Alan. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Frode. That's do you prefer Frode or Frode?
Oh my God, I just
saying it wrong the whole time.
I spent 15 minutes with a BBC journalist today with the most incredibly perfect voice you've ever heard, going through how to butcher my name. So I'm not going to answer that.
I'll listen to the podcast or the program then. A couple of points. I appreciate your comment there. That actually came from a little bit of self-reflection on me, and this will go into a little bit about me, I think. You know, we could still do that roundtable, but I take notes on these calls, and then I put them in my various PKMs, and it's always a problem for me about where to put this. Right? Is this a side project? Is this networking? Like, what is it? You know? And I think it was just last week. I was like, no. These are all the stuff that I do on Twitter, talking and here. These are friends. You know, Not all the stuff on Twitter, but like some of the back and forth that happens there. It's, yeah, spa for the intellect. Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. So you're right. I don't think it's definitely, friendship is definitely maybe a dire position these days, because, you know, even since COVID, we seem to do a whole lot more just virtually, and so to have a Zoom, there needs to be a reason to have a Zoom, you know. So that's an interesting topic. To Brandon, to your point about and Brandel about the nutritional labels and the constructive and holistic relationship, that reminded me of something. I think it's called the fourth wave from like the 80s by Alvin Toffler. So this is long before Silicon Valley took off. And his prediction for the future is that there wouldn't be just consumers anymore. There would be another level of consumers called prosumers. And they would have this interactive relationship with the products that were being made. And they would essentially, like you couldn't have a product without prosumers. And it's funny, like I feel like we got 1% of that with the feedback that we get on products and everything like that, but nothing close to how he imagined it. So it would be great to see prosumers as a concept.
Without me having
Yeah.
the understanding of how he articulates prosumers, do you have like a definition, like a working definition?
Oh,
Like how does he
geez,
describe
no, I mean,
it?
I barely remember. I barely remember how he put it, but he was also very much a capitalist in that mentality. So it's not like he was thinking of a holistic necessarily, you know, like how to make perfect tools. But I think he was imagining, like if you can see how products are today and the kind of feedback that we put in, and even in the Rome and Obsidian communities and on Twitter, where there's actually a lot of feedback going into particular affordances and how they work, it would be like that, but much larger, right? Where, in short, no, I don't have an answer to how he described it, but I'm sure I'll take a look on the web and see if there's anything there.
Yeah, I didn't mean to make that like a semantic questioning. I'm just almost imagining like the some of the benefits that we've seen from touchy subject, but like Web3 culture around rewarding early adopters of the product with airdrops and tokens of, you know, that product, that community. I wonder if it's getting at that notion of really kind of rewarding your early consumers. So without knowing this, that's where my head went.
I think so. There's actually a Wikipedia entry on it, which is pretty wild. And it's defined as an individual both consumes and produces. Prosumption was coined in 1980 and by Toffler and used by many writers at the time, blurring the line between production and consumption activities. I don't see anything more specific, but maybe there's more in there. It'd be interesting to, it was the third wave and future shock. Yeah, it might be interesting to revisit that and see how it applies. The other last little point, which is kind of a tangent, but it's something where there's a bit of technology that digital technology has its own pathology, its own direction that it wants to go, but there seems to be a high alignment with kind of seeing like a state and the idea of formalizing concepts and processes into entities, specifically into acronyms. So again, a little bit about my background. I work at Twilio. I'm a solutions engineer. Never would have imagined that I'd be doing what I'm doing now. But career-wise, I tend to jump around quite a bit, and each new job is like, I don't know anything about that. I want to see what that's about. So the bet with Twilio was, I'm really interested in what platform interactions are like. It seems like people could be doing a lot more with WhatsApp and SMS and not have to use apps. So I want to get into that and understand the future there, especially with ML and how those might work. What I found is a vast phantasmagoric landscape of acronyms on top of acronyms. Literally acronyms on top of acronyms. I deal with ESIP, which stands for Elastic SIP Trunking. SIP means Session Initiation Protocol. Trunking, no idea. So it's all of these arbitrary terms that come from telecom, legacy telecom that goes back 50 years. And when I think about brittleness, I think about technology, I see this former example of, that underneath it all, we just have all of these acronyms. And I wonder how much of that is irreversible, that eventually things just get more and more acronymed or more formalized. And I'm sorry, I'm not making a very cohesive point there, but it does go to a little bit of, the more we try and solve this problem, I wonder the more we wind up making it worse. Which has nothing to do with love or religion, by the way.
Don't worry, we'll get back to that. Mark.
Yeah, a couple of things. What I was going to say something about friendship, but I'll circle around to that, because the interesting thing about prosumers is that it does seem to be something that very much comes out of the marketing world. It's basically the customers your marketing department would like to have, who use all the cool features. What I've actually seen, certainly in the one tool I've been closely associated with now for almost sort of 16, 17 years, is actually your real prosumers, if I really think, as I sort of think of them, are actually quite an interesting crowd. What they mainly do is use this thing you created in weird and hitherto unforeseen ways. And then there comes a really interesting phase, because most people turn up at the door, with their pitchfork in hand and burning brand in the other, saying, this thing you've done has ruined my life because it doesn't do X. And then the interesting part of the conversation, and some people get go at that and flats off. The interesting ones are the stay. When someone says, yes, but it does this and it does this for a reason. So what is it you're actually trying to do? And the really interesting part of to me, the really sort of pro part of that is when that is broken down in an engaged conversation, and normally leads to A, progress, and B, people who are actually at best happy and at worst not angry. So just another spin on the whole sort of prosumer thing. The thing about the point made earlier about friendship, I was also pondering on, is this fact that it being a two-way thing. One of the things that really surprised me, funnily enough, and it occurred in the place I never expected, which is when I went back to university to study. There's a sense of, my attitude was, if I'm in a workplace, these are my colleagues, and I treat them as such, unless they clearly make it plain that they're not worth treating as that, or they don't wish to be treated as that. But I found an atmosphere was, oh no, you're not allowed to talk to me because I haven't decided whether you're suitable to talk to or not, which I found really weird. So this idea, of saying, here I am, this is what I do, you are now my colleague, my contacts are open to you, if you want to ask me about stuff. And I remember trying to explain to people, how is it I'm working in a lab with 70 people and I can't find anyone to answer the subject? I know there's someone here who knows that. It should be an atmosphere where I can find out who they are, go up to them and say, look, I don't understand about X. And they can at least give you a pointer, or they might be disposed to help you. It's not about entitlement, it's just being able to have the conversation. where someone said, oh, that's too private, I'm not going to share that information with people. And I found that a really interesting part of the whole friendship spectrum that is really broken at the moment, seemingly in modern life. And I'll shut up there.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that was actually very close to what I was going to comment back on. And if you want to have a multi-billion-dollar idea, oh, sorry, Peter, I'll try to be really brief. Managing friendships, Mark told me once that because of his situation, he doesn't always know when there's a break in a conversation. I think all of us have that issue when it comes to, let's say a conversation is a book, but what about the bookshelf? How much can we expect our friends and acquaintances to be available to us? When are we being cold to them? And when are we being too bothering? This is something we all had to go through our whole lives, right? So imagine if you could build a digital social system that solved that problem, where people can take part in different communities at different paces. Like we have this kind of a community here, which is great. We generally see each other twice a week. But if there's an email in between, we can do that. But it's not like one of us will necessarily show up at the other one's door in the middle of the night saying, hey, let's have a coffee and talk about the universe. So to find out how to do those connections so people can be included, but also not be a pest, to, speaking for myself, I'm pretty involved with my friends, they could call me that, would be a very, very interesting social thing. Let's pause that for a minute while we listen to Peter. Sorry, Peter.
Okay, I wanted to sort of switch tracks and go to a more technical tangent. And that's the notion, I think, fundamentally, we should consider ourselves, if we want to start integrating tools. Oh, yeah, going back for context. Back when we were talking about integrating the different tools for thought, I think we should consider that we're using parsable text as opposed to just arbitrary text. So there should be the notion that I'm exchanging a piece of text that I know can be parsed as representing this arbitrary name piece of semantics. So I could say this is text. Then we have the notion of, is this a form of parsable text, or does it contain fragments of parsable text? There was a piece I read, and I can't remember where I saw this, but about a month and a half ago, someone was talking about domain-specific languages, and they'd mentioned, if anyone spotted this and could remember where it came from. This is one of those cases where you wish you had the citation and you don't, but you have an existence proof from having remembered something incompletely. But they had a term that they used for a fragment of text within a larger text that could be recognized as representing an instance of some grammar. So you basically have a wash of gibberish, but somewhere within this gibberish, there are little islands of meaning that can be recognized as belonging to one or more named languages, basically. And this is something where HTML sort of missed a golden opportunity. We had the doc type at the start of documents, and if only we had that doc type notion at a finer grain embedded in everything, so that we knew that we were passing along little chunks of text that could have an interpreted meaning. And then you could also relate to different grammars in a hierarchy. So the highest level would be level 0, just ordinary gibberish text. All that you know is its characters drawn from some arbitrary agreed upon character set. Then you could have within that a grammar that could recognize some kind of chunking, and there could be a whole series of little chunking subgrammars, and all that they would do is look at a stream of gibberish and extract islands of meaning that belong to some other format potentially. Then you could have subclasses of format for markup languages. Another subclass of language formats could be programming languages. I always loved efforts to have an interlingua that could take more than one programming language and automatically translate between the compatible concepts that are supported by those languages. Peter Van Roy did a really great book on programming language design that took that approach to having small kernel languages. Then the notion that on top of that, you could have extra grammatical constructs layered on, but everything could be distilled down into the core kernel language. And then you could have an ontology of kernel languages that could relate different programming languages paradigms to each other. And that would open up the door to start doing interesting and sophisticated automatic translation of programs from one language to another. And there's certainly subsets of JavaScript that could be directly lifted and dropped into a C program and vice versa. But then there are concepts like implicit search in a Prolog program that don't have a corresponding representation in another programming language unless you pull in essentially a library implementing those concepts at a higher level. So yeah, that's where my train of thought was going, and I wanted to share that.
Thank you for that. It's a little beyond me, but definitely worth stewing around in the little brain on.
Yeah, I want to understand that more too, and I do agree that HTML missed the boat. In fact, going back to Xana too, one of the ways that I think about it is, or one of the thought experiments I was thinking about was, if we could go back in a time machine to Tim Berners-Lee when he's coming up with this proof of concept about the web, and he's just making HTML to stick together to prove that, hey, you can make documents on this thing called the web. You know, like, what would we tell him from our vantage point that HTML should actually be like?
Oh, I can answer that really easily. Nothing. The reason I say that is he is one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. And his intelligence goes way beyond anything I've seen him actually produce just in conversation. And, you know, the very first web browser, the display was editable. So wikis was there from day one. And a lot of the affordances for the web are, of course, the initial web browsers. So Mark Andreessen, yeah, he needs a bit of a chatting to in retrospect. But I think that in order for the web to succeed, a lot of these bad things just had to be there. The shortcuts were necessary. So I think an interesting question based on what you said now is, having this mess, let's pretend we're 5 years in the future and we look back at today. What did we do to use the current swamp to build a castle? So let's time travel to today.
That's a really useful take, and very interesting about how the original web was, and I guess evidence that we can't have nice things.
Yeah, I would concur with that. Also with the fact that we can't have nice things. I would add to it that all of the best technologies and all of the best tools that we tend to use originate as garbage fires as well. Not just within technology, but also like the English language. As anybody who's studied linguistics, it's not a language. It's 3 languages in a trench coat. It's structurally Germanic, using French words, and it's a result of the destroy the British, the UK population, and creating this forced elision of all sorts of different value systems from a linguistic and a social perspective. And it's what we communicate in. I mean, there are people who speak other languages, but a lot of our discourse is carried on in that. And you know, JavaScript also just a trash fire of a language, but it is going to continue eating the world. It's thankfully died down a little bit, but PHP, you know, is one of the worst languages, and yet one of the most important for what the web is. And so, yeah, I feel like the high-mindedness of designing a technology is at somewhat odds with the inevitability of the street finding its use for things. And so to that end, I agree, like building the castles in the swamp is really the main goal of it. Rather than thinking that we can perfect the technology underlying it. That said, yeah, I agree that I think the provenance of information through HTML is a thing that would be really nice to work on. And I think that there are some interesting opportunities to do that through microformat semantic web. But it's more to do with the praxis of, like Frode said, it's what you do with the browser, how you integrate and interact with things to make them carry that provenance through, rather than necessarily the formats themselves. We're having similar discussions in the 3D world these days with the idea of the universal scene description, which is the file that hopefully will become the 3D lingua franca for for the web and the model tag, which will be what constitutes 3D objects. And that will include things like text, just because they can't stop me.
No, that's wonderful, Brandel, but I just have to take a brief detour into a TikTok I saw a few days ago. This linguist guy was saying, why is Chinese a tonal language? And, apparently it could be this, that, and the other, but the research showed that it wasn't actually originally a tonal language, but a lot of the words were really quite long. So what people started doing over time, just like with other languages, is chopping bits off. So what happened was that, just like in English, we have to address and address, right? And address and to address have different pronunciations, right? So what they did, as they chopped off the ends, the tone of what came before that then had meaning. And that's how it became a tonal language. How random is that? Thanks, TikTok. Yes, Alan.
Two quick things. One, I nominate Brandel to give a talk on one of our sessions, because I would love to hear.
Actually,
Great.
first, I've already asked him. So
that.
I'm first and second. So you're second.
Yes, you did ask. No, when I was absent from that list, I was. Understandable. I don't have the pedigree of the rest of the people that you put on that list, but I would love to speak at some point about things. What was the basis for that, Alan? What do you want me to talk about?
Well, I've always been keeping my eye peripherally on 3D and virtual as a how to get there, and that's just so exciting about the universal scene description, and I want to know more about how you're approaching it.
Yes.
And how even, it's to use the term pedigree, the pedigree of VR is so different than that of the web and HTML, because it started out in games, and so that is really, in some ways, way more intriguing, right? And then a little more, I feel like, testing ground there. So I'd love to hear all your thoughts on that. And another one about China, I would love to have someone speak on culture and language in China, and how we can, as a differentiation, as a parallax to the evolution of English. I'm starting to read about China now, and it's fascinating how much, the Western culture just sort of glosses over and just says, "Oh, it's Confucius," and and they're really big, and glosses over all the interesting points of evolution there. So if we know somebody, I'd love to see a talk on that, text and language in China and culture.
It's been really interesting. So reading a number of books on, I've been reading about the history of writing, the history of reading, history of indexing also. And, it's incredibly Western centric. And I don't think it's from an ideological perspective. It's just basically not looking beyond one's immediate bounds. And I finish all these books and I'm left with, you've only covered one corner of things. Are we really saying there was no other, development of anything outside this that's germane or acts as a sort of counterpoint to it? There's a lot missing, and that's probably partly due to the English language Borg, I'm afraid. But I must say, I too not. It's interesting. It sort of goes back to this thing, and it's a sort of C-suite problem. It's looking for the people coming up and saying interesting things before they wander off to do something else, and not responding with, "Well, that's fine, but that's not my problem now." And it goes back. It's a bit of that prosumer thing. The fact that someone comes up and is rather angry is the point that you have to work. You have got to get through that to say, "But what is the question? What is the problem? What is that you're raising?" Because that's probably addressable, and if it's not, it ought to be. Or else it's, if it's a problem, it can and should be addressed in some way. but often we just get stuck at the argument level. Well, that's humans for you.
So I agree with what Alan said regarding for you to present, Brandel, but just one word I just wanted to chop off a little bit. You used the word pedigree, saying you don't have the pedigree of the others. I think we have to be really, really careful. We talked about love and friendship earlier, and respect is another term that comes into that. And the thing that I've always, with the Future of Text Symposium, which is kind of where this work for me started, I never introduced anybody. It was always name talk, right? Because a few people were famous, a few people were not. And the thing is, I've interviewed a lot of people over the years, and a lot of the old guard who were really famous, they were really good at being politicians. But then you look at the new young guys, like, don't forget, the internet itself was done by graduate students. Vint wasn't an old man then. So I think I know you're being humble and polite, but I think as a community, we need to be careful that if somebody has something to say, we shouldn't need to do that level of politeness. And second, I'm putting in the chat a little YouTube video. It's a flight sim. There's a really nice thing in there, Brandel, where you can also see it as kind of a graph afterwards. So I'm wondering if you have any views on VR environment as a thing, but then also viewing it as a completely different thing, like view specs for 3D, so to speak. Sorry, that was a lot of mumbling.
No, that's a really fair point as well. It's something that I also need to. My wife cautions me on as well. It's when I underplay my own background as well as my own skills with things, then it can also make people think that the level.
Sorry.
Of sort of. Go ahead, Alan.
No. My YouTube, I clicked the link stupidly and YouTube started playing. So I blame Frode for that.
Yeah, no, fair enough. No, because I've said in a similar kind of salon like this, digital salon, that I didn't know Blender very well, and in fact I've been using it professionally for over 10 years. I just don't use it as well as some of the best people, just quite well. So yeah, no, that's a point well taken, especially because of the broader impact on a social group of people. But to the point of the language kind of eddies and different sort of currents of pools, I lived for a year in rural China. My father has been living there since 1996, and so had a bit of time just reading his textbooks on 10th century Chinese political history and stuff, as well as recognizing I wasn't aware of the abbreviation thing. That's really fascinating. It reminds me of the inexorable and infuriating Australian tendency to try to end every word after at most 2 syllables, preferably with an E or an O at the end. And I'm wondering where that tendency actually comes from, whether it might actually be some South Asian roots rather than elsewhere, because there are a lot of different people in Australia, and sort of be a lot of different sort of linguistic politics kind of at play beneath the surface. But also, while I was living in China there, I went and I did a gig in Qatar and in Dubai, in Doha for 2 months. And the way that place is a collision of so many different cultures and linguistic sources is fascinating, because it's vastly more connected to North Africa. It's also quite a lot more connected to South America than a lot of places, because they don't have the same total dominance of English as a default. And so while a lot of stuff is done in English, it's really more of a matter of convenience, and they don't have the same kind of alignments where it must be East Coast America, West Coast America, or Western Europe. So yeah, I agree that there must be really interesting sort of currents. Another thing, though, that with China that did happen that is unavoidable is that the Cultural Revolution destroyed a lot of not to use it in a different way, the pedigree as in the cultural continuity of intellectual Chinese thought, and then in the Middle East, the sort of the historical development of that was also substantially damaged by the onset of basically the Marshall Plan and the rising dominance of Saudi politics, which were of a very different ilk to the more traditional intellectual tradition that had emerged in that area. So there are also political discontinuities that give rise to a lack of access from at least an Anglophone perspective, but overall the sort of the intellectual continuity in those two places can be harmed.
That is tragic.
So I have a question for everybody. Who's watching The Expanse tonight, episode 2?
I stopped watching.
Is that the new series?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to save that till after Christmas because I want to enjoy it as a sort of run. But I read all the other. In fact, I've read all but the last book as well. And actually, as these things go, it's not too bad. It's interesting that the authors are, or is it the author rather, which is 2 people.
Yeah.
One, if not both of whom, are basically work at G.R.R. Martin's factory. Now, there's someone who needs to get off his backside and finish his book.
Alan, did you say you
Well,
stopped?
now that we've, oh yeah, I couldn't. I hear that the newer seasons are great, but I can't get past the. I don't know, maybe it's season 4 or something. I really liked the first 2 seasons, and then it's just kind of I'm not prepared to get through it. But now that we've broached the topic of sci-fi, I do have something to admit. I like to watch bad movies, and especially when I can't go to sleep. I just watched Johnny Mnemonic, and it is a delight. First off, it takes place in 2021.
Wow. That's
and
horrible.
it has a world pandemic in the form of some neuro. Yeah, it pretty much nails
syndrome.
20. Yes. It pretty much nails 2021. And in fact, there's the metaverse, which, wonderful. So happy.
Pharmaceutical companies are running the world.
And then he actually, at one point when he finally gets to a computer to do, to basically use it as a phone book, he says, and get me 2 iPhones. He says iPhones. And so it's worth a watch. It's pretty amazing. Now, similarly, a few years later, this is another movie I watched, but I haven't been able to finish it. Virtuosity might be such a garbage fire that it possibly could be a masterpiece. I can't believe it's not more meme fodder because, wow, terribly bad film. The only way that it matches up to today is that a virtual reality serial killer takes human form, which predicts Trump quite well.
I thought you were going to say Idiocracy, and that's another good sci-fi film.
Yeah, Idiocracy, but Virtuosity.
That's fascinating.
Anyway.
I have the opposite question as part 2, and that is, I think it would be fun if we have a movie night where obviously different time zones, but we watch the same thing and then we are kind of primed by that for our next discussion. So maybe the new Matrix or Dune or something like that.
What's June?
Dune, D-U-N-E.
Dune. Oh,
sorry, I'm mumbling again. Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, I'd also like to recommend Free Guy. I just saw that.
Oh yes,
that's good fun.
Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, it's
I
lovely.
love the guy.
Really?
I love the unfinished guy at the end. It just cracks me up.
Brandel, you've seen Free Guy, right?
No, I don't watch fiction.
You have to watch this. It is your fiction. It's somebody being inside a VR environment, and some of it's silly, some of it's thoughtful, but I'm sure you will be amused like crazy.
In America, we have I don't know. I can't watch Free Guy because I can't really watch Ryan Reynolds on screen.
No, you can. No. For this role, perfect. No, the different people for different things. He is this character. This kind of annoyance, right, is what it is. Okay, basically, it's a preview of Facebook's metaverse with all the bad that goes with it, right? All the cheese, like, oh, yeah, guys, come on, watch it. Brendan, have you seen it? You're being quiet.
Yeah. Oh, I've seen it.
And
it was good. NPC gets, it's kind of awareness in the world, and it's a fun exploration. And yeah, Ryan Reynolds
And I think it comes from a place of love. I mean, in the sense that it's a comedy, it's setting stuff up, but it has, the people writing it have to engage with the genres, able to write it, so it works.
It's
You know what I do? I'll watch it in 30 years.
No, it's
just like I did with Johnny Mnemonic.
Well, that's weird because I watched Johnny Mnemonic and I think, so now you remind me, it's both my past and my present, because I watch it. I remember sort of doing those things. I haven't overclocked my brain yet, but but until you said it just now, the idea that it is now my present, it's sort of 2021. That's kind of weird.
But Brandel and Alan, you're in two different time zones. You're East Coast, West Coast, right?
Mm-hmm.
I still want to watch it with you guys. This is crazy. I haven't seen this. It is the current pop culture nonsense, but there's a few clever things in there, and it's really, really hard not to spoil it for you.
And it's wonderful call-outs to all sorts of other movies and books.
Yeah, that too.
They're nice and subtle. They don't get in your face. If you don't recognize the Easter egg, it won't irritate you. There's no way bashing on, hey, you're looking at an Easter egg now.
Yeah,
it reminds me, it has the same nice feeling as watching Galaxy Quest.
That's very true, Mark. I agree.
Yeah,
that's what I'm afraid of.
Galaxy Quest is a work of genius, Alan.
Look, I like Galaxy Quest. I like it. I like that I saw it, and it's not a thing that I need to experience again. It's good. It's good. It was light. It was fun, and I like the tone of it. I think that it's also interesting that at some point, oddly, I want to take this back to friendship, but at some point in our capitalized, weaponized comedy, capital C, we went from thinking, and we were trained by Family Guy and probably Simpsons, that self-reference is a form of humor, or pop reference is a form of humor, right? So all you have to do is make reference to X, and then you'll get a laugh track as a response. And so I have a kind of an allergic reaction to that.
But I understand that, but I was thinking one of the lines that most stated in Galaxy Quest, in a sense, moves outside that, which is the thing of, have you guys even watched the show? It's actually stepping outside the frame, and it is so true of so many organizations you deal with. And you're sitting and thinking, I'm the only person around this table who's actually sort of had some real interaction, because it's like everybody else is talking about a completely different product or a completely different experience. So it's not all totally referential.
All right.
I take your point.
Point taken. I want to touch on something. Go ahead, Brandon.
No. That's it. There's some novelty in that film. I think you're selling it short at the moment.
Okay. Brandel, first of all, I don't want to isolate you because you don't watch fiction, which I respect, but I would like to know what nonfiction, what documentaries or series you would suggest, because I find a lot of times the things that are pitched as documentaries these days are probably even more without content.
Right. Yeah.
So,
I agree. I used to do some work. I did some computer graphics for Natural History New Zealand, which is an outfit that does documentary stuff. It was part of Discovery at that point. It's now been spun out into an independent entity, but they make like 400 hours of natural history documentary footage in a year. And their rule of thumb is about 4 to 11 minutes of substantive content in a 1 hour show, based on the pre-roll, the buffers, that kind of thing. And it's part of it sounds cynical, but it's also just to do with the nature of people's consumption and the way that attention is so partly played out. I don't really watch documentaries either. I mostly try to watch things like academic proceedings and the wealth of information that I get access to, but is not specifically for me within Apple. So we have an internal sort of YouTube thing. It's called Phantom, That shouldn't be a secret. And so there are a number of people who put videos for training in their various organizations and divisions and things like that. And then, yeah, there's just such a wealth of really interesting academic conferences out there, from human-computer interaction to design to philosophy, that are really central to what we talk about in venues like this. That there's enough time there, and then I try to put some of it to work. So I build stuff. Some of it is pretty silly. So I did start making inroads, Frode, to the analysis of the screen, so that we could make some measurements or assessments of what is happening within a Zoom call. I got very, very distracted this week building a recursive virtual environment of a computer desktop on a computer, so that you get the ability, so that you have sort of the infinite recursion of your screen and your screen and your screen and your screen. And that's been very entertaining, but I promise at some point to get it back to something useful. I'll find a link of it, because I very much enjoyed it. But yeah, so
that's
so
an
I
excellent
try to make stuff.
It's funny you should use the word useful there. Oh yeah, I saw that tweet. That's just super cool. But also, in defense of not being useful, that's one of the things fiction can really give us. When we talked earlier about if we can go back in time and future in time and look at things. But I'm just racking my brain for something really kind of thought-provoking. And of course, and I'm not trying to be super annoying, but for me, Hamilton is one of those things, because I don't watch it just as the building of this country on the other side of the ocean. I see it as people getting together to build a structure for a new society. So there's so much of that keeps re-inspiring me. But there's got to be some good current sci-fi that everybody finds a bit moving us in an interesting direction, no? Anybody suggest anything?
I really like Greg Egan. He's a Australian author, has written some really interesting hard science fiction, and is pretty decently aware of downsides of things and the reality of things like gig work and the way that it'll likely play out as part of the tapestry, the rich tapestry of life that it creates. And to that end, I really enjoyed the brief burst of willful optimism that Neil Stephenson had in the Project Hieroglyph. I don't know, not sure if anybody heard about that, but
I haven't read that yet.
Could you please
It's neat.
could you put the names
Sure.
in the chat as well, please? Sorry, I'm interrupting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely will. So there's a good talk that Stevenson did to promote it. The idea was that a lot of the technological development of the mid to latter half of the 20th century was inspired by golden era sci-fi, which, for all of its flaws and warts, was one that glamorized and glorified big stuff getting done. That people had a vision for stuff that could happen, and while they said, the implementation will be left as a detail to the reader, a lot of the people who actually really invented those things, for better and worse, credit those science fiction stories as being responsible for those inspirations. And one of his concerns as one of the fathers of cyberpunk is that there haven't been as many things inspired by those stories. And so he wanted to write things that were semi-plausible and get other people to write things that were plausible, and then get them in consultation with actual technical experts who could go into a deeper discussion of what it is that those things might be and further reading. And so he talks about things like building a 20-kilometer tall tower because of the impact that it would have on launch capabilities, and a number of other sort of socially connective technologies that are neither dystopian nor particularly utopian, but opportunities to think about specific artifacts and advances and the broader social consequences and impacts. And so, yeah, those are both really, really interesting. I'll grab the links for those.
Sounds like someone we should have in our monthly meetings. If we can get any good sci-fi writers, that would be amazing.
Oh yeah, that would be super cool.
I found the Foundation series on Apple TV Plus, some of it a bit plodding, but some of it quite thoughtful. Any of you
I loved
followed it?
Yeah, I was a big fan. I thought they did a cool reimagination of at least the kind of key character that leads the charge. I was a big fan of that. I thought the first season was really well done.
And the idea of empire,
Mm-hmm.
the way that's portrayed is, you know, it's not about explicit technology, so to speak. Okay, cloning, but still, you know, identity. There's a lot of good stuff in there. And also they didn't have much hardware. It wasn't like a massive computer thing here and a massive ship there. If you went on a ship, it's because you needed to go somewhere. It was, yeah. Anyway. I guess
to that end, another salon that I'm part of is something called the Near Future Laboratory. It's a group of people who work together on speculative and critical design fiction, which is fiction, fiction, but in the form of objects and artifacts that tell a story about a world, imply certain things, and
Julian,
they are really interesting. Yeah, Julian Blake. He's on a call right now. I'm missing that one.
Yeah. I that's cool. I didn't know you were involved in that group. Design fiction is really neat in general. Their framing is extremely helpful. And it comes from the Bruce Sterling generation of creating an artifact so that you can see the future. And that's a neat angle to sci-fi in general.
So
yeah, I also really like Nick Foster's Future Mundane talk. I point a lot of people to that. I'm looking forward to. I've got the galleys of their manual design fiction that should be coming out next year. I've been reading through it. I really love that as a reference as well. Looking forward to being able to point
Nick Foster's what?
The Future Mundane. It's a video that he did in 2015, 2016 or so, and it talks about the way that fiction, as with design, also tends to focus on heroes and exceptional people rather than the middle, the background talent, and it's a really cool lens to think about what it is that technology really is, to the point of like how things break, how things accrete, and stuff like that. So it's an awesome sort of primer for thinking about what that stuff is. I'll find the link and put it.
So I think I can.
I love that Near Future Lab.
I think I can extract from your brain, Alan, and mine at the same time, the question of what is a good way for that community and our community here to be aware of each other? How can these things connect without being overbearing? Communities are like people too. It's got the same social conventions of how to connect but not being intrusive, right?
In all honesty, bridging the gap from like painting a picture of visual meta in the near future. As an example, you know, some either technology or standard or way of thinking that is brought from one community to the other. And really cool thing the Near Future Lab does is, well, there's two things. They do design seminars where they bring like, I don't know, 15 people together and just have a conversation around one topic over an hour. But atop that, they also, as I mentioned earlier, write and create like mini artifacts that come out of a technology. So you might have a very practical bridge with the Near Future Lab with regards to visual meta. That could be a cool exploration of what the near future might look like.
I think one thing before it sort of passes from mind again, and it goes back to when we were talking more about, you know, other dimensions and things, is something actually came up moons back. Somebody, again, was back in doing some tinderbox stuff. It was a guy, he was writing a musical. And one of the things he wanted to track was things like the emotional intensity. So that, in other words, there are all these other axes that weren't as literal as you know, the progression of the text, but they were fundamental to the oeuvre as a whole. And the idea was, well, if I could in some way show this, it would help me understand, you know, where I want to, how I maybe want to move some of the stress or parts of the narrative. And I just thought that was another interesting idea of, you know, what you do with those extra dimensions. Now that that's a possibility.
So that was very interesting, Brandon, both as a community, and it would be lovely to have an introduction, but also, you know, the very simple thing of visual meta. If you look at it poetically, let's pretend we have a movie and someone is coming across a document that has it at the back. You could imagine like in Foundation, something gold and dusty and spinning will come up and make a thing or whatever, right? I'm wondering, even today, you can have text and then a little superscript character. You click on it, you get an endnote. How can we make endnotes absolutely amazing in the sense that the document becomes the tip of the iceberg, quite literally? So you go through a document, but there's so much available behind that you can imagine, let's say, a teenage child in like Ender's Game kind of a setting, right? Writing a thing. But the act of writing that thing isn't just literally those characters. It is immediately connected to something massive that can then come back out the other end. We had the thing of having, you paste a spreadsheet into Author and it makes a sparkline, but then all the data is behind, so you can choose to view it anyway. But how can we do that with a sentence, like something written here to make that, it's just a question, but yeah, Alan, please.
2 points on that in particular. An area that I don't feel like is talked about at all, to the point that I even feel stupid bringing it up, because it makes me wonder if it's already a solved problem and I just haven't read the right document. But when I hear something like that, I go back to the quote from Metaphysical Club about the a handle being treated as the real thing. So I think the problem, I think the problem is not at the interface or the endnote level, but actually at the identity creation level, in that entities right now, I should say, are treated, once you have tagged it, once you've created that entity and pointed to it, you've unintentionally reified it. All hyperlinks are reifications, right? Versus an idea that doesn't exist and could be totally flawed. But I think of a word as being one point on a kind of a X, at the very least an XY axis. And that word should be able to float around in that space. As you mentioned, even in the last talk, between the spectrum of the helicopter mom and the delinquent mom, mom as a term should float between those axes. And if we could attach connections to that, right, rather than the specific usage, I don't know how to do that, and I don't know where that lives, and I don't know how much work goes into it. Don't want something like the semantic web where you have to define every little thing for every little thing. But that's the to me the consistent bottleneck or brittleness across all of these possible solutions. Okay, so that was point one. Point two, I think you made a great observation that, yeah, there's an invisible army of all of these wonderful salons and groups and circles, schools, and hardly any of them are aware of each other. It makes me think that in a very practical sense, not to say that there should be a site where all of these are collected, but the practical idea is that maybe if these different schools could agree to a sort of a schema, then you could not have to attend every single one, because the point is not to make these things all larger, right? It's great, the organic quality and chemistry that happens with each one of them. You don't want it to be totally, I mean, there's this line where it's like your core members, but like I would love to go to the near future laboratory, but maybe what I'd really like to see is see the proceedings, see the minutes, but not even read through the actual minutes. Something like getting an example of an ontology of salons, or an example of some good exchanges. Like, just give me like a quick equivalent of an intriguing Twitter tweet thread, a sampling of these different salons, and then a single place where all salons would dump into, that I could just sort of move around and not have to even actually be a part of any of them, but I could get again, that spa for the brain, spa for the mind, by jumping around.
Brandel.
No, that's something that's definitely not all, but a number of them, particularly last year, this office hours for Near Future Labs was recorded, which is an interesting and innate reference. And I believe that Julian has been doing a sort of a précis of some of the greatest hits from within the general seminars, which was really neat. So that there's that and an annotation track, an audio annotation track, where he and I think Katie have been talking about their sort of reactions and considerations about what is relevant there. But another neat thing that has been happening of late is that somebody's been building a Biblio Bot, which is a thing collecting the links dropped in the chat during the office hours and during the week in the Discord, so that we have some kind of artifact that represents all of the outlinks for the place. Something that I've been thinking about is having some mechanism to be able to understand and identify not just those links, but what we did with them, whether or how people visited them, and potentially give them an opportunity to reflect and discuss what those things are. So to have those as kind of responses, something that Frode actually mentioned for future of text at some point in the past was a concept of being able to see not just stuff, but various community members take on stuff as a component of it. And I would say, you were saying, how can we blow out what a word is, what the web of things in the more holistic concept of the web rather than just the World Wide Web. I would say for some people, the browser kind of is. The fact that you can right click or you can select text and then just search for that. I've been at times kind of really enchanted by just this idea that simply by having words, not even as URLs or links, they represent in a much softer way references out to an outside world and environment that people can inevitably kind of look for. The counterpoint to that is that 90% of users don't know how to Control F or Command F. So they don't even know how to find on page, let alone do a web search for keywords that they specifically seek. So there is, while we all technically have the same conduit to the internet through our phones and through our laptop computers, the consequent experience of the different levels of proficiency that people have with what they do on the web result in vast disparities, which is challenging because I think it means that we don't have nearly as much in common in terms of our experience of what we do in this place as we think.
Agreed. Very 100% and well put.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Two things. One, you guys, if you haven't, please try my product Liquid. It's Mac OS only, because it allows you to, within half a second, perform any of 300 different commands on any selected text. Very hard to communicate to the general public, hence not a big thing, but it's connected to the other stuff. Second thing is, going back to our earlier conversation, based on Brandel's point, the word artifact is very attractive to me. And I like having a sculpture. I like having a painting. I like having something that I can keep adding to a photo album, whatever it is. I think a lot of people do. In knowledge, we call those things knowledge graphs. But the problem I have with knowledge graphs is there seems to be an, pardon my French, insane journey towards capturing the entire universe in a knowledge graph, and it's never going to be perfect. So maybe what we should do is take the bad stuff of HTML, quote unquote, and make a graph that is shareable, that is very, very simple, that capitalizes on the stuff that was missing in HTML, but doing it on purpose, just so that, Alan can build the shape of a thing, send it to Peter, etc. Doesn't matter what software it is. And I know that this is what you were talking about, Alan. I know this is what Sunday is about. I'm only proposing that try to make a standard that's so simple that there will be errors, but the uptake, the investment people will have to put into it is so low that hopefully in a generation or even in 10 years, someone else will sit around a meeting like this and complain about us, but at least it became a standard. I saw your message, Peter. I think most of us have to go on the hour today. I know I have to go quite soon, but what is the feeling on super simple graph sharing?
I love it, and I also think that there might be an answer in what I'd like to see is little AI. I think that like interstitial GPT-3s, if you will, once something is identified, and maybe you just right click and say add to graph, then it goes through a couple of layers of a GPT-3 like process, first being the broad swath, the billions of parameters, and saying, here's what this possibly means. And then maybe a more personalized or primed version of GPT-3 that's your own, where it says, okay, now here's some common usage that, you know, subject may or may not be aware of. Here's more likely what is meant based on their own reference material and priming. And then I'm going to introduce 2 layers into the ontology, you know, and it's sort of, that's the trick. I think ML would actually play a great place in a shared ontology, but not in a huge, totally automated way, in a little genetic material kind of way. That's it.
Yeah, so basically I would interpret that as being a translator. So, you know, Brandel would build his space with certain things, and there would be a minimum shared thing. However, he's adding all these cool things, which he may help mark up or not, but there will have to be the kind of smart translator you're talking about, Alan, which can automatically put it in your system or ask you questions like, we think Brandel's world, this means that, however. We just have to do this. It's, yeah. And I think with all due respect, the last people we need to talk to are graph specialists, because I think perfection has gotten in the way.
Yeah.
Well, that ties into a big thing that I've been telling my daughter, and also a lot of people at work who are interested in software engineering. It's like programming is really a means to an end. So I was like, when people learn programming, it's just, I can get a computer to do whatever I want. Yeah, cool. So what do you want to do with it? Because that should dictate what you learn about. Like, oh, just whatever I want. Yeah, but what are you going to get it to do, and for what purpose, and what consequence is that going to have? Just anything. I can do anything I want. It's like, you don't understand me. And I feel like knowledge graph science can very much end up that way. Like, we can have edges and understand these certain things. And like, yes, that's true, but what will it do to the world? Think very carefully. We all know about Cambridge Analytica these days.
On that bombshell, look forward to Monday, and have a good weekend, everybody.
You too. Hey, before you head out,
yeah.
Before you head out, when do we want to have a kind of a focused community talk on newsletter, some of the other stuff that you brought up?
Shall we say this Monday that's the only topic? The only topic is how to run this next year.
I'm in favor.
I can even see Peter nodding, so that's good.
Let me see if I can join on Monday.
Yeah, I definitely can't. I know I can't do this Friday, for what it's worth.
Same.
Yeah, next Friday is Christmas, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'll be here probably, even though it's Norwegian Christmas. But anyway.
In fact, actually, thinking of that next Monday might probably be problematic as well.
Is it Monday at 10 Eastern? Sorry, you probably don't have that information on hand.
Monday, same as today. We could change it a bit, you know. Hey, it's. But I did get an email from someone called Pavel
11.
Zachernuk,
who wants to join us, and he said he'll join us on Monday. So if we can do the same time, that would be good.
In fact, I'm pretty certain, but sadly next week probably both are out, because I'll basically be we got people around and stuff, so I'll have GTs.
Okay, but let's see who can make Monday. Okay, well, all right. Well, at least we'll start with that. We'll get something down, and then we'll share it with the wider community to figure out what to do. Okay, have a good weekend, everyone. Good to see you all. Bye.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.